All right. Thank you so much, first of all, for attending. This is AppleScript in all the wrong places, so if you're in the wrong place, then you'll know now. But I have honestly been a big fan of this strange language for a long time, and that's a different strange language. So hang on one second, I've got a script for this. 1 minute. And there we go. So anyway, to begin, any of these statements that or opinions that are stated are my own. I get to say what I like to say. And on to kind of who I am. I started on System 7. Yes, System 7, rock solid, so rock solid that it needed a tune-up update. And HyperCard. Yes.
Yes.
That round of applause, I'm sorry, just warmed my heart. I need you to know that. HyperCard came along with a scripting language called HyperTalk. And this was so cool. You could automate stuff within HyperCard stacks, so that meant like you could do text, actual bitmap pictures, buttons, complex things like animations, X commands, which are basically almost operating the rest of the system from HyperCard. So AppleScript, it's not quite the same, but there is one common command, and this is probably the command that most of us learn the first time we're messing with any scripting language. And that is the humble beep, because everybody loves a beep. I'll admit I've overused this at times. I usually like to do the flash the screen as well to get somebody's attention. Let's take a look though at HyperTalk's beep and on AppleScript's beep. So HyperTalk is repeat for 5 times. I want 5 beeps. So I'll end that repeat. And AppleScript, repeat 5 times. Very, very, very familiar. So overall, I have definitely been told a lot of times not to do something in AppleScript. There are lots of reasons. Some of them is, there's sometimes an API available, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's, okay, this is just a different way of going about things. And sometimes it's just, this is just such an awesome hammer in my hand that I can kind of conquer any nail with it. Because things I've been able to do in AppleScript definitely are also most things. A little bit of a dive in on what's good about it. Because first of all, it is supported by more apps than you would expect. There's a lot of scripting dictionaries within apps so that you can basically take these, they kind of have their own language, their own paths. So that way when you're calling an application and telling it to do something, a lot of the time that application has enough awareness to go, okay, I understand what that is, and I'm going to do that. The syntax, we're going to look at lots of this, is made to be very plain language. It's supposed to be, you should be able to kind of read it and get an idea of what it does. And this is probably what most folks use AppleScript for today, is prompting for user input. Being able to just pop up a dialog box and get back a button or a string. You can do secret input. There's a lot you can do with the display dialog command alone. And this is my personal favorite. If you can see it in the UI, you probably can script it. You can read and interact with websites. Safari was honestly always best with this. I honestly haven't checked Chrome in a while, but accessibility-wise, Safari was absolutely incredible for, if I need to automate something that does not have an API and do it as politely as possible. Also, AppleScripts can be apps. So that means that you can take an app identifier, you can version this, you can have comments, and sign, notarize something that is an AppleScript app. So this is something, it's not just more trustable, it's cooler because everybody wants to be able to just double-click something. And in the event when you can't necessarily, if you're not scripting something through a self-service or something like that, it's a really great way to just say, okay, open this up, we got the rest. AppleScript, of course, is not perfect. So show of hands, who's fluent in Bash or shell scripting? Yes, I say that's, yeah. There's always learning to be done for sure. All right, show of hands, AppleScript. I'm still amazed that was definitely a larger contingent of the room, but that's one of the cons, is there are not that many of us out there. I'm honestly, I'm just excited because that number has grown from any time I've ever asked that question. So awesome. So there is, with AppleScript, there's more typing involved because of that plain language. You're kind of going to, when you're telling an application something over and over again, it might just take a little bit. And Script Editor is not necessarily the friendliest app to be the default for this. There is autocomplete by hitting the escape key, and it is not on by default. Yeah. And also, when it comes to UI, changes can get interesting sometimes. Transparently, it's UI scripting is, and we're gonna dive further into that. It's something that can be frangible at times, and you can make it also as robust as possible. A lot of it has to do with just how you're looking for the thing on the screen. So yeah, let's talk about Script Editor, and we'll make sure that that's active. Script Editor looks like this. Code goes on top, and the result goes on the bottom. If you hit those 3 lines on the bottom, you'll actually get more output. Typically, you're going to be seeing, you'll just see kind of the last thing that happened if that's not clicked. This way, you can actually see the script go through. Okay, I've done this, gotten that output. And just to give you an idea, how much have things changed since the past? Not that much. Looks very, very familiar. Right down, it looks like they just dropped the pen. That's basically all that happened. So yeah, what I use personally, I actually do use Script Editor. It is not the greatest editor in the world, but it's just grown into a part of me at this point. So now it's, that may be the center of things, but we really do, it really is, scripting's about where are you getting stuff from, what are you calling? So Finder for file operations, and I'm using things like UI Browser and system events to address the GUI directly, to basically do things that that may not necessarily have a scripting equivalent action. And of course, the neat thing is you can actually call other interpreters. So we'll see in one of these early scripts too, do shell script. There's going to be a shell script in the middle of my AppleScript. And there can be an AppleScript in the middle of your shell script too. My approach, though, when it comes to kind of learning anything, is to start with a problem. I started by breaking the dock one day, many years ago. And AppleScript, speaking of creating an app with it, it's a really cool feature. You can also make what's called a read-only app, which means that no one can actually see the code inside of it. And I had ended up doing that for my first script that I could find in my archives. So that particular one is MIA. To give you an idea, though, this is actually going to be fairly similar, probably syntax-wise. When it comes to guiding users, this is a problem I had. I worked for a PR firm many years ago, and the users needed to connect to a website. I've censored the name of it with some slices of bacon. And the solution really was a one-click script to do some pretty simple stuff. So this was version 1.0, and then version 2.0 when Firefox came out. This is so small and so simple, but we didn't, at that point, we weren't a Jamf shop, we didn't have a self-service or anything like that. It was the way for me to get my app to the users that were out in the field. And I mentioned being able to call AppleScript through shell. It's just as simple as specifying, okay, I want to run a script using that -e flag. Specifically, that is saying I'm just going to do this in one line. So just give me what I'm doing in one line. If you want to do more, of course, you can just write that into either a plain text file and call that through OSA script, or just open up Script Editor and save that too. So another big thing that I've had was gathering information. Something I highly don't recommend, but I'm sure many of us will or are going through. I am the only IT person for the company that I am in. People need quick access to me. We've got 2 locations, and folks don't know my number. Also, I don't necessarily want them calling me over every single problem because there sometimes can be a lot, and I'm one person with a pair of Xserves. So that came up to a solution that I called Don't Panic, which was really simple. Let's zoom in on that a bit. Don't panic, and this is just a little bit of a sort of what is this doing? The first thing it does is check for network connectivity. If it doesn't find any, it says, hey, you should probably call me, because I'm at that point, you can't email me, you can't text me. And then from there, it'll make sure it's gathering information. It's grabbing like the CPU version, OS version, anything that would be kind of useful to me, along with serial number, and then tries to find me on iChat. I'm using a lot of old words today. And if I'm not present on Bonjour iChat, then it will actually try to, it'll put together an email with all that information and send it right over.
The internet connection that's not working.
Well, that was the thing. If the internet connection is not working, it won't do that. Okay. Yeah, that was honestly the biggest thing of why do I have a check for internet connection at the very beginning of the script? Just because, yeah, if it's not working, you're going to have to pick up a phone because I don't think you know how to reset that router. So getting into AppleScript a little deeper too, subroutines, if you're familiar on Bash, it's a similar concept. The idea of having a piece of code that if you need to run it more than once, makes it a little easier. So rather than, we've got these examples here where, we've got kind of an inline. I'll take this. There we go. So in this example, we've got the text item delimiters. We're flipping that every single time. And in this way, right at the bottom, it's one line. We know we're going to have to do this more than once. So one of these, a subroutine really does turn into anything that kind of needs to be done more than once. This one, I know this is a little bit tall too, but this is what I call auth token, and this is actually to grab an authorization token from the Jamf API. You can see there's actually 3 sort of if-then statements in there because there are 3 ways to communicate with the Jamf API. Yep. And it's so much easier in the middle of a script rather than having to put all of these lines in, especially if you do it more than once. Just having it nice and organized, being able to call it, and also being able to pass variables to it in those parentheses. So I'm just passing it the server ID, the API name, API password, or API user, the current, and it'll reach out and get that connection. This one's a bit more complex. This has a bit more to do with AWS. AWS has a service called Secrets Manager. And Secrets Manager is pretty awesome because it's a place that you can keep secrets. You can keep things like API keys or passwords, things that you don't necessarily want anybody to kind of get their hands on. And you can really get the access to that is restricted in a very, very granular way. So being able to say, okay, I'm using the AWS command line tool in my AppleScript here, and all I need to do is pass it, say, okay, here's the name of my secret, here's the key I want from it, and then it'll return that right over. Sometimes subroutines can get a little big, and this, I don't know if this is my largest, but it may be. What this one is doing, though, is actually running on, let's see, let me make sure this is going to play here. So nope. Say sometimes videos don't work. Today is 2 for 2. Account driven, and this is something I can show you more easily this way. There we go. Account driven is actually doing all of these actions, and this is normally invisible to the user. But what this is doing is an account-driven device enrollment on a cloud Mac, on EC2 Mac. I'm borrowing a demo server here to use for credentials, but this is all occurring without any humans in the mix. This is very much something that can be done before the Mac kind of makes it to the user's hands as well. So all of this, it's a complex process, but it's one that does have a decent bit of awareness to itself. So when I showed that subroutine, a lot of that sort of, okay, why is there so many lines when I'm literally just going to click one thing and then click another? Because I don't necessarily want to just say, wait here. I want to say, wait here until you see your button and then go for it. There's a couple of different ways to do that. It's definitely something where you can either have a try block where something's, if it fails, you can give it a conditional statement from there. If thens, it's definitely a wide range of how do you fix that sort of thing. Let's get back. So yeah, we were going to automating the UI. Where is? It's live, everybody. How am I doing here? Sorry. For real this time, we're going to talk about automating macOS UI. And I am going to talk about another piece of software that I use quite a bit. And honestly, it's a little bit strange because UI Browser is technically discontinued. It is available as a trial and is probably the one thing that I use the most when it comes to what is that thing that I'm looking at on screen. Because what you can do is actually kind of get an idea of where something is by just passing a highlight. Weirdly enough, the highlight does not show up on a screen recording, so that was an interesting discovery. But being able to say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm targeting, say, this line in system preferences or system settings, and just knowing the path to that and being able to say, okay, I know which entry I want. I just need to know kind of whereabouts to get it. So you'll see a lot of these statements: tell application system events to tell process Safari. And that is really where the UI scripting comes in. These require accessibility permissions in addition to typically permission to control the app that it is trying to control. In the case of cloud stuff, you can actually grant those permissions and save that in an image. So that way you don't have to go back and CCC that. But of course, if you're enrolled, you do have that same control. And if you compile that script, again, you can say just that app identifier gets this, nothing else. So my first UI script was called Airport Reset. And again, this one's got a lot of stuff that's sort of, I just commented out because it wasn't working. Again, I had a problem here. The problem was way out in, again, three lifetimes ago, there was literally an airport server or an airport base station that was operating in this company. So it wasn't always easy to get out to the other location, which was literally an hour and a half, I think, from between each other. So this was just, I just ran on my, I think we had a Power Mac G5 in there, and definitely did its best. Weirdly enough, resetting this, I think it was once a night, ended up pretty much eliminating any trips I had to make over it. So let's kind of put this all together, because you've seen kind of some of the larger stuff. This was probably the big problem that I faced in my just previous life to this one. Device configuration is something that we are definitely, in this room, we're definitely familiar with. In 2011, it was a little different because MDM was just starting to kind of become a thing, and Apple hadn't released configurator or configuration utility. We had iPhone configuration utility that had the power to push profiles and gather information, and we had iTunes. So what do you do sort of when your customer says they need apps and there's, they need Apple IDs in order to get apps? That's where this software came in. First Aid was for generating Apple IDs. You can see there's a whole lot of just key code 27, delay 0.2. This is why this was 1.0. Because in this case, if something took a little bit too long to load, it's not really aware of it, and it's just going to kind of keep mashing away on the keyboard like it just doesn't know anything's going on. The subsequent versions of this very much have that, okay, I know I'm on the next page, I know when it's loading, I know when it's done, and really that's been, when it comes to UI scripting, one of my biggest kind of what can you do well is really just figure out what you need and then hit it after you know it's there. This was the first draft of Arashi. It was called iTunes Automation. It would not compile, and I saved it as an RTF file. That had turned into this. This goes off the screen, I will admit. And this was, again, all about, we're operating iTunes. We're operating iPhone configuration utility. In some cases, we're grabbing the information that we need, apps, books, from a separate folder and actually putting those into whatever device is being connected. So definitely, there are big things that can come from small packages for sure. And just diving into, one thing that I had with that last script was you had to click it. And I know it's sort of, you have to click it to get started. From there, it was literally, it would detect when you plugged in a device. It would actually let you know that it would let you know when it finished the process. And it was pretty cool seeing this happen in a giant warehouse with a bunch of them. But having to have that start was honestly a little bit like it was another roadblock. So I'm sure folks have used launch agents and launch daemons, but a lot of folks haven't. And there's definitely some nuance to this that was maybe just lightly challenging. So being able to, first of all, I do like to always mention, launch agent is user level, launch daemon is system level. So if you're trying to get to something on the screen, what you want is a launch agent. If you're trying to get to something back end in the system, you need privileges, launch daemon is really where you want to be. So I put that into my enroll EC2 Mac script, which is nice and short. Actually, this is 405 lines more than the last one. I did check. This, though, getting into the comments, this is enroll EC2 Mac, and this is what we saw a part of this in action. We saw kind of the one subroutine for the accounts. This is also able to communicate via the Jamf API and grab a computer invitation. Take that, make that into a profile that you are able to enroll with, and from there, finish the process. Basically, as long as it has those privileges and those can be baked right into, yes, I said image again. Imaging is actually a thing in the cloud for anybody who wasn't in my last session. And being able to do stuff like not just cache software, but also really take customizability into account, because a lot of the time when you're dealing with things that are outside, it's usually more developer oriented and really something that you want to make sure the thing gets done, and it gets done as securely as possible, and it gets done with as little friction as possible. So mentioning that launch agents specifically, this was something where I said, okay, if I can't get this, I've been trying to type these via text file for a while. Something keeps going wrong. I'm going to take one that I know works. I'm going to use all of basically the most of the XML here and replace that, of course, with the commands that I want to run. So in this particular case, we are running what's called a setup flag on that enroll EC2 Mac. The thing with that script specifically is that it's able to, it does kind of process all of this at once. The setup is just to basically make sure you have the permissions. After setup, you hit OK, and then create an image from that device. That image is then, when you load that onto something new, which is literally just kind of start it from that Amazon machine image, that will it'll carry through the permissions. It'll do the thing that we just saw completely transparently. In the case of not doing automated or account-driven device enrollment, ADDE, it's not automated, it's account. And that really was that really did is something that we've seen at the very least a lot of folks doing. But specifically, being able to do this launch agent was important. The fact of the matter, is that when you are getting to getting your app running, you do want to make sure that it has kind of the right set of privileges, the right things that it needs. So, in the case of this, we're operating the screen. It does have to be a launch agent. So in this case, it is writing that automatically. It's setting all the permissions that it needs as well, and it's also loading that launch agent at the very end. There is also there's a piece in the script too, where you can pass it a restart agent where it'll unload and reload the agent. And I literally mention that just because there's no way to restart a launch agent. It is literally just unload and then load. So yeah, I try to think of folks when I'm coding. So I do want to leave lots of room for folks to ask questions. This is a big subject, and there are lots of folks here that may have something. I have done so much, obviously, in AppleScript, and am happy to share as much as possible. Most of my recent stuff has been open source, and I'm planning on adding more to that. So yeah, let's kick it off. Questions. Yes. Thanks.
I guess I have 2 questions. The first is for using UI automation. How do you figure out what PPPC settings you need to enable those?
Typically, what I do is it's kind of a backwards approach where I'll start the script, and when it prompts, kind of follow what those prompts are. Usually it's going to be 2 things. It's going to be accessibility is the primary one, and letting system events control whatever application your target is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you had mentioned that you like to use, was it UI browser, but that it's defunct. Have you tried using Accessibility Inspector instead? Does that give you the same results?
Basically, yes. There's a couple of shortcuts that I really like in UI browser, and of course, I'm stuck in my old ways. There actually is also another piece of discontinued software called Script Debugger that was absolutely excellent for AppleScript that, again, I just couldn't get my muscle memory around for some reason. So I ended up, just kind of hacking away on the old stuff.
All right. I guess last question. So I noticed that you seem to prefer the plain language syntax. Do you know of any downsides to using the JavaScript syntax for AppleScript?
Honestly, I don't know of many downsides. There's a lot of upsides. There are functions that are way easier to do in JavaScript than through AppleScript than through straight AppleScript. Yeah, that's transparently. It's just because this is the way I learned. There's a few things where I have actually dropped in some JavaScript just because it's like, okay, no, I literally can't do this on one side, or it's going to take 7 lines and I can do it in 1.
Yeah, I've written a couple scripts in AppleScript, and like the plain language syntax always just drives me up a wall because I'm a static language kind of guy, and so.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely it's strange because it's also like you can rephrase things every once in a while because you can say my something or something of me, and have that kind of be the same result, but it'll still compile it in the the different phrasing, for example. Oh, you got one up here.
The only downside to JavaScript is that if you're used to JavaScript, JSX is very, very weird syntax.
That's a good point.
Like, it does things in a significantly different way because it's not doing JavaScript things. It's using JavaScript to do AppleScript things. So your syntax is going to be a little odd at times. The other thing I want to point out is that if you find yourself doing OSAScript-E with these insanely complicated things, you don't have to do it that way. There is the option to create a shell script that's basically an OSAScript shebang. And then you can just write these very long AppleScript syntax, no escaping spaces or special characters, and run it as a shell script. And if you really want to get clever, which is easy to do, and this is actually supported if you compile your script as a script bundle, you can throw shell scripts, other Apple scripts in the resources folder and call them from the main Apple script. And then you just ship that out, and you can have all these things in there. I tested this with an AppleScript Objective-C app where I shoved the entire PowerShell for Mac distribution inside it and was calling PowerShell scripts via AppleScript. It's kind of wild, but it does work.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is very cool.
And as long as it's still supported, which God only knows with Xcode, AppleScript Objective-C still seems to work. And it lets you build like actual real applications with vaguely AppleScript-ish syntax. To the point where I actually had at one point 2 AppleScript Objective-C apps in the Mac App Store.
Oh, wow.
But you will get no support from Apple. DTS will ignore any ASOC questions. So just, you're very on your own in that case. Luckily, MacScripter.net has a good AppleScript Objective-C section. And if you've got the money, it is technically going to be discontinued in the future, but Script Debugger is absolutely worth the money because you can do breakpoints, you can watch variables change. It's one of the best debuggers I've ever seen.
I told you, like I said, I definitely was missing out on the best possible tool for a really long time. Yeah. Oh, we got 2 back there. Looks like.
So, am I the only person interested in John's talk next summer about AppleScript? I'm just going to put it out there.
I don't think anybody wants the last 20-minute rant, if that would be why.
I think, no, it sounds like we're just going to do it together next year then.
I'm down.
We can go off script.
At some point, I have to point out that Apple supports this not at all. So if you're doing anything interesting with AppleScript, just expect that you are absolutely completely on your own. And if it happens to work with a given OS, great. If it doesn't, they will not care. I'm just saying, don't rely on AppleScript support in any given OS at any level. If it happens to work, great. If it doesn't,
Yeah. That is one plus with the images too, is that at the very least you can keep something on that version, so it'll almost definitely work unless the HTML changes. But that's, like I said, interesting UI changes.
This question is just out of curiosity to see if you've ever attempted this, but have you ever tried an AppleScript that would run first aid on multiple volumes before? And if not, how would you go about doing that via AppleScript?
So yeah, for running first aid on multiple volumes, I'd probably do a because I can call disk utility from the command line and do like a disk util list, have an idea of the volumes that I'm working with. Then from there, just take an FSCK to them. I think you probably want to make sure that they're not mounted as well. But yeah, no, honestly, that's a good way to go. You also can literally just do a list from the Finder if you want to actually just work with the volumes that are on the desktop.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Rich.
So most of the time I've done Apple scripting has been in connection with writing an app for Automator, because it's sometimes just so much easier to solve things that way within Automator. Recently I was overhauling one of my Automator apps, and with Apple scripting, a lot of my stuff starts with do shell script, and then you have to figure it out in Bash first, and then translate it to AppleScript. I found that ChatGPT is actually surprisingly fluent in helping you figure out the right AppleScript syntax and escaping for translating something that, like, you have a complex sed command.
Yeah.
You ask ChatGPT, how do I put this into AppleScript? It'll actually do a pretty good job, and even tell you about ways that you think this would work, but it doesn't work, so you actually want to try this.
That is good to know, because yeah, I'm the type of person, I put AI to the test a lot of the time, and I'll shake my old man fist at it but yeah, this is kind of like the perfect subject of, when you have a machine that can help you learn about it, and especially help you compile it. That's really, really awesome. So yeah, maybe I'll start working faster this year, and we'll see what. I actually, one of my projects was going to be actually just throwing my 400 something custom scripts folder into an AI and just basically say, okay, I want to ask you to program like I do, and then it's probably just going to take 5 months to just go like this. Thanks. One more.
All right. My throw is bad, so be prepared.
Yes.
All right.
So, do you have a best practices way of using the environment variables, like say, like the current logged in user, log user?
Typically, I usually pull from Finder when it comes to kind of getting the active user. I know there's a console command or a stat command on console to figure out who's officially logged in. I think that's my most common. I just have a do shell script for that, but yeah, at the very least for usernames, tell application Finder to get name of current user, to get short name of current user. Those will get you the same string.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, one more. It's not, and I'm not saying one more. I'm excited. There's another.
I'm trying to write AppleScript to loop each user in the users and groups and match the username with the current logged in UI user. And I couldn't figure out a way how to find the username. When I try to use the automator, it only gives me window 1, list 1, area 1, but I really want to loop all of those users in showing up in that users and groups. And then after I find that, I want AppleScript to click the I information button and pop up the actual password change window. What suggestion will you give to me to make that happen?
That's a good question. First, I would say that sysadmin control might be better at that from a command line perspective. You may be able to do that without popping up the UI at all. In order to do that, though, that very much is something that AppleScript can do. You may need, I mentioned a utility CLI click. It's available on Homebrew. And it's very, 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 very simple. It literally just allows you to click a certain area. So what I have is AppleScript will look for what its kind of its target first, and then I'll have that give the screen coordinates, pass that over the CLI click app, and that'll click or double click as needed. So you can just basically say, okay, this is list 1 of window 1, and go through that. Or you could also do something like a dscl.list, list users, get the username from that angle, and possibly do it a little bit more in command line. So there's definitely a lot of options.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm literally just sitting here. I'm like, should I write it right now? Or it's like the engineer in me just gets going. All right. All right, if there's no more questions, thank you so much again. This was awesome. I'll see you soon.